Hi, my name's Penny Snowball and welcome to part 4 of the series of the documentaries, short documentaries that we're making, entitled In Search of My Mental Health, The Road to Recovery. This particular section, number 4, we're going to be talking about waiting lists and what's being done about the waiting lists, what they are, how basically if they exist. According to some people, there are no longer any waiting lists. So we thought we'd open this up for conversation and also to see what can be done about it. So yeah, we really over to you guys, because I know my experience of waiting lists is coming to Surrey Alcohol and Drug Advisory Service, going to Acorn, going to Rape and Sexual Abuse Advisory Place, and having an assessment. Waiting generally for ages, often not when I came to SADAS the first time, waiting for an assessment, and then after an assessment, you know, having had to dig up a whole load of personal information, which is, you know, like, you have to answer all those questions to be able to get through the door, to get to see whether you need a counsellor or not. And then having dug up all that stuff, to then be told sometimes you've got to wait 4 months to see a counsellor, 5 months to see a counsellor. It's like, where do you go with that stuff? You know, and I mean, I know for myself, after I'd had one of my assessments, I went straight out to the off licence because it was too much for me to cope with all the stuff that was coming up. And then to have to go then wait for another 4 or 5 months. And I just wondered if you could just kind of discuss what your experience of that is, being service providers as well yourselves, you know, and also service users, haven't you been, both of you?
I mean, at the moment there's a big drive, and funding is outcome measured and dependent on sort of positive outcomes, and there's a big drive to sort of keep down the waiting lists. Where I'm working at the moment in Wandsworth, we can usually get to see people within sort of a couple of weeks of assessment, which is brilliant. But I think that's probably because in London there are a lot more services available, and so we're very lucky. But I know that in Surrey, when I was working for Surrey Alcohol, you know, sort of a drug advisory service, we were really the only counselling service for drug and alcohol in the county, and we just didn't have enough resources.
I think the government, because the DART put in place these compulsory time limits, then agencies like ourselves, who aren't NHS, have to prove that we are within those time limits. So what we have to do is to cheat, and our way of doing it was to get people into group. We would put people into group therapy or offer them group therapy. Once we have it offered them and they could take that up that week, they're no longer on the waiting list.
Wow.
Now, it's not what everybody needs, but it was our way of continuing our funding, because what happens is, if you don't keep up to the contract or the service level agreement as it's called, then you would lose your funding.
Wow.
And
or have your funding reduced, and in
Wow.
the end it didn't make any difference because we got our funding reduced or withdrawn anyway. So.
But unfortunately, group isn't appropriate for everybody.
No.
But because they've been offered some sort of treatment, that's sufficient, which isn't really sort of ethical, but it's just needs must.
Wow.
To be able, you know, to offer some sort of treatment. And of course groups are going to be more and more popular, I think, as time goes on, because they're cost effective.
Wow.
Or cheap, which is a much better word I like to use.
Yeah.
Cost effective is a great management word, because it sounds good, but cheap. And this is what the government is about, because of the present financial situation. Everything has to be cheap, you know.
So where does that leave people then, in terms of how they are, let's say, with groups, after groups? How does that leave people in terms of then getting the help that they need, let's say the one-to-one counselling?
Our problem is that in this time is that too many people want the service. there aren't, there's not enough money to give everybody one-to-one counselling in the way they want it or they need it. We tend to treat people en bloc rather than individually, and I think this is where the whole service falls down, because because there's so many people, we can't treat them individually, and so we have to say to everybody, right, you can have 6 sessions of counselling. Well, for I would say maybe 1 in 10, 6 sessions will probably be good enough. For the other 9, it's not. It's not enough. So what happens to do? They have to go through the cycle again and again and again, and that, because there's a break in the process, that is really not productive. What happens is it takes much longer to get people into a sustained recovery than it would do if they had the proper treatment.
Yeah, because it's like you have the 6 sessions, or let's say maximum 12 sessions, which is what I had when I came to you. And then when that 12 sessions comes to an end, you have to go back onto the waiting list. So just as all the stuff's coming up, because let's face it, who's going to go into, most of my experience anyway, you go into a counsellor, because the doctors are doing it the same, aren't they? You get 6 sessions, and as you say, for some people it works. But if you go in and you're completely shut down, you're completely shut down, and you don't trust anybody anyway, which is, I know a lot of addicts, they have huge trust issues, abandonment issues and connecting issues. How on earth are you supposed to develop a relationship with someone in six sessions? Just as you're beginning to trust somebody, maybe towards, like in the 12 sessions, just about starting to check them out and see, well, this is me anyway, are you okay? You're out the door and you're back on and all this stuff, you're left with all this stuff that's coming up to the surface.
I think it's not...
And the next time around you might get a different counsellor.
Yeah, it really is sort of cutting corners, and it's not ultimately therapeutic, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But that's the way that we're having to go. That's the way we're being ordered to go, unfortunately. It's a
And the
difficult
government just
situation.
wants to be seen to be giving a service. They want to be able to say there is treatment going on out there. And of course, although there is treatment going on, it is not really a satisfactory treatment. It is for very few members, and because it works for 1 or 2 people, they say, well, that's good enough. It works for them, it should work for everybody.
But then everything is geared, and is going to be more geared towards positive outcomes.
Yeah.
Your funding in the future is going to be geared towards positive outcomes. So where does that leave people with complex needs who are going to need an awful lot of work? Nobody's going to want to take them on.
That's very
because
interesting.
they won't have a positive outcome, or particularly not in 6 to 12 weeks.
I hadn't,
and I'm very afraid that people are going to be shoved between pillar and post. Oh, you're not appropriate to our service. Go over to the mental health team. They'll say, no, we can't work with you. You use drugs or alcohol. And nobody is going to be willing to take them on because they know that they won't get that positive outcome from them in the time frame.
So then when they don't get the positive outcome, you don't get the funding.
No.
And this is what you've been saying about plaster job, like, things being very prescriptive. So not actually dealing with the individual's problem, but having to having to sort of, what's it called, not micromanaging anybody.
Mass management.
Mass management of people.
Because you're doing it. But the government would love to shove everybody into groups and deal with it through groups, because you can get one facilitator dealing with 10 people.
Right.
But then, of course, in a group of 10 people, there will be 2 people in that group who won't get any attention whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because they'd be too frightened to be able to talk in the group, and they won't get any attention.
Yeah. And so then that kind of, they come out of group feeling worse, and then then they haven't asked for their needs.
Huge possibility of relapse.
Yeah, huge possibility of relapse. Yeah. So they're not really meeting the needs really of the majority at all, are they?
I don't think that the way the treatment goes on this day, it meets the needs of anybody.
Right.
Most people, if they can stop you drinking, they'll send you out because you've stopped drinking. That's good enough.
Right.
Yeah, and quickly,
Yeah,
before
as
you
quickly as
relapse,
possible.
because then
Yeah.
it's a positive outcome.
Gosh.
You know, which is quite scary, really.
Yeah.
Quick, discharge them because they're okay at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Gosh.